Is there something that people get wrong about career growth?
Career growth can go horrifically wrong
Is there another big mistake you've seen over those 70 mentees that you tend to nip in the bud? Is there a big pattern where someone is making a mistake that you tend to fix?
So the first thing is the expectation level needs to be at a level where it's actually achievable. The second thing is...
My first question is, how was it working on the greatest game of all time?
Which one?
Not those actually. RuneScape.
Okay. It was super interesting. I was initially kind of coming to this as a outside the games industry, so a bit of a history on this one. So I worked in originally travel and tourism, so building booking engines, building systems that scale effectively, doing live operations for those. And I did a talk at the Excel in London about kind of how you can kind of engage with players using user-generated content, scaling your systems to make that happen, everything like that. So it was a kind of not necessarily boring. I liked that kind of topic back in the day, obviously, but that kind of conversation, right? And that then got me an interview with Jagex to talk about how could we apply what you're doing right now in the booking engine and upselling and UGC kind of area into video games. And that then turned into an interview for initially web team lead, but then became a dev director within a year to develop basically the essential kind of core platform for that game, for account management, for payments, for any kind of user peer-to-peer stuff, anything like that, from leaderboards to forums, anything like that. So it was a really interesting kind of engagement. We were part of what we call a live service team, so central services team to build the tech for all our clients, games, obviously, in that kind of context. So it was interesting to kind of see two things. The first one was because I worked on multiple games or support multiple games, seeing how they worked and what they did, obviously. But seeing RuneScape literally go from strength to strength in terms of their content, their pipelines, their delivery. It was at a time we kind of moved from a Java client to an updated Java client to a web HTML client and everything like that. So there was a quite high technical kind of change in what was going on. And seeing that, being part of those conversations, being part of the testing, of the integration, of the delivery was fantastic. Yeah, and I really loved it. And I do genuinely miss it, I must say. But it was a very high pressure, high delivery kind of environment. And yeah, it was good to kind of see how games and how teams work together in that kind of scale. And then seeing whenever a change of content came out, what that did to player engagement. Numbers grew, or they stayed the same, or maybe gone worse. And then what that meant in terms of data collection and feedback from players, what the next steps are for the studio to do, for example. It was exciting to learn all that and see all that happen almost in real time.
Yeah. I love the part of your job where you get that immediate feedback. It's not you doing work for a year, 2 years, and then you're seeing the result. So I'm wondering if you...
Yeah, I think that, sorry, I didn't interrupt you. I think that's an interesting thing, because if you work on live games, the feedback and the engagement is near instantaneous, because you live or die based on your audience, right? Let's take a different game. Let's take Alan Wake, for example, or let's take Control or any other game, not by Remedy, but Hitman, for example, if you will. Those games are built in a completely different kind of light, right? In this... You build the game over years to create this amazing immersive story. God of War being an example like this, right? So you build this to tell your story, to tell what's going on, to make people feel something when they play it and enjoy when they play it. And then the story ends, unfortunately, whatever you want to see, obviously, in that kind of way, right? With live service games like RuneScape, it's completely different, because that's always progressing, always changing, always something new is coming in, right? So that instantaneous feedback there is super, super important, because you want to kind of get more players. You want to have the current players kind of engage more.
On RuneScape, I have like over a year's playtime on it, like a good 380 days just logged in. So it's like a big 5% of my life probably has been logged in that game. And I want to ask you, what puzzle piece do you solve in a gaming company? Like if you're speaking to someone who has no context, like if you had to break it down very quickly.
Think of it this way. You've got a development team that delivers the game and works on the game and makes the game happen in the first place. Then a part needs to exist that then publishes and releases that game to the first-party platform stores, PlayStation, Xbox, Steam, Epic, GOG, etc., obviously. And then something needs to happen to then see what happens to the players afterwards and what engages with the players. If it's a live game, that's my responsibility, ensuring I can publish this game and deliver this game to a live space. And I can provide the data, the telemetry, the feedback, the crash reports even back to our kind of game development teams to action this. And not only that, I'm responsible to deliver game security, event management, so for in-game events, for example, replacing the shop content every day or every week and the featured content every day or the week. Planning to launch seasons, planning to launch kind of minor or major updates or story arcs, for example. My team takes care of many of these aspects. Now, we don't develop the game, we work with the game development teams obviously to make this content happen, obviously. But we look at this from an almost kind of engagement stroke forecasting point of view of saying, okay, we want our players to engage more and get more players and acquire more players and everything like that. What levers can I pull either directly with my team to make things happen, like balancing, adding new store content, new cosmetics, new battle pass items, a new quest line, whatever it might be, for example, or daily kind of missions or weekly missions? Or is it kind of, we need to provide more content in this particular area, or we want to launch this brand new world, this brand new map, this brand new game mode, for example? How can we make this happen? How do we get kind of early feedback on this from maybe a hardcore number of players who enjoy our game right now? And then as part of that one, how do we work with the marketing team, the community management team, the social team, the customer support team on then announcing this, planning this, having patch notes to go with that, having support notes to go with that, everything like that to make sure it's a joined up exercise. So game development goes into my space, if that makes sense, to deliver, to support, to engage, and to elevate that kind of way. And that then supports other teams like the marketing team to kind of acquire more players or show more kind of engagements or have partnerships with other companies, for example, for IPs and anything like that, and everything around that. I think that's kind of, in a short note, what I do. It's obviously much, much more on this one. But yeah, we kind of take what the game does and elevate it into a space where players actively engage with it. And we then take that information and data and provide back to the game team and plan together on what are we going to do next.
I wanted to ask you a question from the perspective of someone trying to enter the games industry. Either they're a graduate or they have a previous kind of industry experience. What would you say to them? Because were you a gamer before, for example? Was that a big part? Because it sounds like when you're talking to me now, you have such in-depth knowledge. But I'm wondering, at the very start, did you learn that at Jagex? Did you try to get that before?
I was a gamer for a very long time. We played, my dad and I used to play Lemmings back in the day on his old 368 Commodore computer. And we taught ourselves BASIC as a development language or programming language to kind of build our own kind of game to kind of shoot each other with like tanks for velocity and things like that. Back I was almost like 6, 7, 8 years old.
I remember playing those games. Both of those games you talk about, Lemmings and the tank game, like childhood.
But you learn so much about kind of how code can kind of make change, right? So it was a kind of nice thing to do. But no, it was, I always loved playing games, but I never felt like I would fit into the games industry because back in the day, it was a very kind of niche kind of space. You had your Sid Meier, you had your kind of Microsoft in the US and everything. So we were quite heavy kind of spaces in the US that did that. And I felt I lived in Germany, obviously, that was never attainable back in the day for me. So I started initially with design and marketing as well, which was really cool. What got me excited was then changing from print to web design because I like kind of understanding how the backend effectively works. What needs to happen in the code base to make my website show this, for example. I mentioned earlier I was doing booking engines, and that's kind of where I kind of cut my teeth effectively, building stuff for larger air operators in terms of booking systems, plannings, everything like that. And understanding kind of how code changes impacts websites, for example, that then taught me how to think about the bigger picture of how do we operate and how do we kind of get players purchases to buy things and book things, everything like that. And because I had that and I could talk freely about it, that's kind of how I got in the games industry, because I could explain how things happened and why we operate in the way we did, and how we kind of get customers and consumers to buy our book through our systems, for example, and how we monitor those systems at scale. That was what Jagex needed. in this role they hired me for, right? That kind of helped me, having had this previous experience of doing something similar to this. It was tech at the end of the day. It was still code at the end of the day. So whether software or games is neither here nor there on a bare bones kind of conversation, obviously. But that's what happened. And being able to provide that information and proving that I can do that and can talk about it and kind of show how things work really helped me with the interview process, and then also the quite rapid promotion in the role I needed to be to support them, obviously.
You had that key transferable skill.
Yeah. And if you think about where you want to end up with, or in be that art, be that programming, be that whatever it might be, you really want to show that you understand the subject matter. It doesn't necessarily mean you must have always been in games. I certainly wasn't. I came in, I left, and I came in again. But to get that kind of first step into it, you have such benefits, especially right now, of being able to say, this subject matter excites me and interests me, and here's the stuff I have been doing that complements that kind of thinking, that delivery aspect, that creative aspect, that whatever aspect might be for the role you're going for example. Being able to prove that really, really helps.
You mentor a lot of people, and I want you to actually paint a picture here because of how many people you mentor. So it is very uncommon for someone with the amount of stuff that you have to do. And you also post on LinkedIn, which we're going to get into later, but you mentor a crazy amount of people. So I wanted to dive in deeper, like what helps with them. But first, could you paint a picture, like how many hours are you spending networking people, mentoring people, and how many people are you mentoring?
So in total, I've had 70 mentees over the course of 3 years. 8 of those ones last year were full-time. As in, I had a regular kind of catch-up with them, and the remainder was largely kind of 1 or 2 calls with them on seeing how things go in terms of progression and their role and everything like that. I also had about over 150 or so career chats, which is about kind of what my role is, what programming does, what engineering or production does, for example, in colleges, at universities, or in one-to-one talks or panel shows, conversations in the UK and in Europe as well. In terms of time spent on these things, it depends, if I'm honest with you. I normally try to make a mentor call 45 minutes to an hour to begin with, to get to know that person and seeing what they're doing and what's going on. And then spending also some time, usually last 15 minutes of that hour, to understand kind of, okay, how can I help you? What is it you want to get out of this conversation? Or how do we want to progress this going forward? In most cases, what I found is it's mostly about, I'm currently in this situation, in this company, or in this kind of place, and I want to get there. And there could be a promotion, could be moving sideways, could be having conversations with the manager about kind of work performance or anything like that, or could be breaking into the industry. So there's a number of kind of ways behind this. And the understanding that is quite useful to begin with, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be a good mentor. But then it also kind of explains to kind of what is the next step on this. In most cases, it was this hour is enough for them because now they have a bit more kind of clarity in what they want to do. I gave them some guidance, maybe some questions they can ask themselves to move on and do whatever they need to, for example. But there have been some of them where it's been useful to kind of have a more kind of personal touch in the context of having a session with them every month or every 2 months or every quarter as we progress, obviously, to see how things go and see where I can help them with. There have been 2 of them. One girl is Tess Nihil, who is now working for Uber Strategist, I believe. She wasn't in game to begin with, but she wanted to kind of learn more about the industry and what can be done and how she can support that. So seeing her grow effectively from where she was into a games industry role was utterly impressive. And I felt a lot of joy speaking to her because you could always see the creative thoughts she had and what she was doing and how far she got from the previous call to the next call to the next call. If you see that, that's ultimately super, super refreshing and rewarding.
Can you imagine? What did she get right, you think? Why did she succeed where others
Persistence
can't?
and creativity. I think those 2 things were the ones that kind of really stuck out to me when I spoke to her every time. She knew what she wanted. She had a clear understanding kind of where she wanted to end up in role-wise, I mean. And she had this inert drive to push for things and ask questions and take things on and saying, I can do these things and I can do this too and I can support you here, and delivering that. Not being a jack of all trades, but rather saying the role you're looking for, I can fulfill. But if there are other areas where I can lend my hand or my expertise or my knowledge from other industries, I'll happily support you. I think that's kind of what really kind of stood out for me. And that's I think how she got there in the end. And she made it super successfully.
So that persistence, I think, is the key to everything. I'm wondering, is there another big mistake you've seen over those 70 mentees that you tend to nip in the bud? Is there a big pattern where someone is making a mistake that you tend to fix?
Yeah, I think there's two of them. The first one is there's a level of expectation from people. If you're my mentor, I expect you to fix things for me or make things happen for me. That's not my role. I'm here to ask you gentle questions and or direct questions about kind of what you're trying to do and where you want to go with, obviously. I'm not the person to say, okay, I've known you now, Harry, for 5 minutes. Let me find you a job. That's not what I'm doing. So the first thing is the expectation level needs to be at a level where it's actually achievable. It's ultimately up to you as a mentor. It's literally in the name. I'm mentoring you to kind of get there where you need to be, but the job is yours to do and to happen. That's the first mistake. The second thing is not having a clear drive of what you actually want to achieve. Oh, I want to go into the games industry. Oh, I might be doing this. Okay, what is it that you actually want to go into? What is that kind of career path you're looking for? You might still change. I'm not saying focus on one thing and only ever do this until you die. No. But if you want to break into an industry or into a company or anything like that, what is it where your starting point needs to be? What is that starting point? We can then discuss in a year's time after that, once you established yourself as a person, as an individual, as a deliverer of things, of creativity, of being reliable and a good person in the company, what that then means for you then as a starting point into other roles within that company or industry or otherwise. But yeah, not knowing where you actually want to go into and then persisting with it and pushing for it, I think that's where many I spoke to kind of fall down.
Getting the foot in the door, I feel like without that, it doesn't matter what the ambition is, because you need to actually enter the industry. Is there any common roles that people typically you've found success with where, from one example I get told a lot is like QA is a good way to get into the industry? I'm wondering, is there any type of roles where if someone has no games industry experience, they want to enter the games industry, is there any top roles that you see that people go for?
Let me turn it around a little bit. Let's talk about the entry-level positions. I think that might be easier to kind of explain what I'm getting at. If I look at entry-level positions at Creative Assembly, for example, the company I was there previously, and also Jagex back in the day, you had a lot more engineering interest, if that makes sense. So engineering was another kind of way of getting into the industry because of the fact engineers always wanted, and because tech is largely being taught these days at colleges, at universities, across Europe, across the US as well.
So is that wanted from the candidate side or from the employer side?
From the employer side. So having the kind of level of kind of having programmers joining us early is a good thing because you can nurture them and grow them in the tech we're using, for example. That I found really interesting. When I worked at Creative Assembly in my first year, for example, I was just brand new to the company. We had quite a few interns and we had quite a few kind of entry or trainee or associate positions that then grew into this company kind of area as well. I must admit, I didn't really engage with the creative side of the business because that wasn't really my remit or my discipline or my pillar. So I can't really comment on that one. I'm sure others that you will speak to can do better than me. I can only talk about programming productions roles, for example. In this case, I can say, yes, we had quite a few, and those grew quite quickly into the organization because of what they were doing and because they did really well. That's the way in. QA obviously is, and there's also other roles in the organization, from IT to finance to other places that still work in the games industry, still support studios and people, obviously. But where we also saw people move sideways into marketing, into production, into QA, into other areas as well, because of the interest of having shown that they can do something and them wanting to further their own skills over time in the studio.
Proving that you can do something, I feel like, is the number one priority. And that doesn't need to be in the discipline that you have to, like, that is the kind of goal that you want to be in. Like, if your goal is to be the most amazing producer ever, if you just demonstrate that you can do things for a gaming studio, that is the stepping stone.
And being good at your job. Because think of it this way. If you're saying, for example, okay, I want to come into QA because it's an easy entry, inverted commas, and then I want to go into programming right away, that doesn't show you in a good light, because it basically means you're in there for the career progression as opposed to doing a good job, right? So that's always a kind of consideration. So I always say a year, because that proves that you can do the job and doing really good things. It depends on the candidate, on the company, obviously, as well. And the size of the company, how that looks like as a guidance is one way to show it. You want to be seen as you can do your role, you can do it really, really well, you have interest, and you have a drive to show that you can do something else. Oh, I want to do it for the money. That's not a drive. I want to do it because I can do these kind of skills. I want to prove that I can do these skills, and I can deliver this, and I can show them I can deliver this. That's drive.
You've had an interesting career. We've touched on this, where you entered the gaming industry after already having a career outside. Then you left the games industry, and then you came back. So could you tell that story there, in the sense of, like, yeah, why did that happen? And is there any pivotal moment there that kind of shaped your kind of Alexander story?
So I got into the games industry because of the work I did before, obviously, at Jagex, before Jagex. And got the interview at Jagex, which was fantastic. And I worked with Jagex for a long time, which was amazing, truly amazing people, truly amazing projects. And unfortunately, what happened is that at the time, one of the projects we worked on was being cancelled. And at the time, what then happened was there were layoffs. And my team and I were affected by those layoffs. In my personal life, I just got married. I just bought a house, so I had a lot of insecurity about kind of how do I kind of, keep the mortgage going, keep everything else going, for example, understandably. So for me, having been laid off was quite a shock. For everybody, I think, who's been laid off in these last careers, it's always a shock. It's not going to change ever, how no matter what I'm going to go through. So I then looked at what other companies are around me, because I couldn't really move because I just bought a house there. What other companies are around me, and what do they offer? And so I found a really, really good job for another company. They were looking for head of tech to develop some of the kind of solutions for companies like Barclays, like Santander, EE, O2, and these kind of companies. So I went for the interview, had a look around and had a conversation with them. And it felt really like everything I learned prior to Jagex, at Jagex, in terms of delivering, in terms of managing people, in terms of delivering stuff at scale against the live operations. All of these things I would need to use, and I would need to kind of grow on in that new role. So for me, it was a great transition. And it was also a wonderful learning curve, because you all of a sudden speak to clients as opposed to your internal team. I've used the clients in the past, but now these are much, much bigger clients, obviously. You engage with so many different teams and third parties and partners and suppliers and vendors on this one as well. So I learned a lot about vendor management, about planning different kind of projects with different teams, cross-functional and cross-discipline and cross-region and cross-country. That really taught me a lot, and being able to work there was absolutely fantastic. I then had the opportunity to kind of work at a different company as a CTO, so a huge kind of leap in terms of my experience, my knowledge, my growth in terms of my own career. And there was a contract role, effectively, kind of deliver and making changes happen in this company with an intent to sell this company to another kind of competitor, for example, which happened. So there was always a least life on this role anyway, which was great. Interesting, great, depending on kind of how you deal with that personally, obviously. And yeah, so I found myself, and this was literally when COVID happened. So there was January 2020 when that sale went through, and then the role got dissolved, everything like that. So yeah, I had in my back of my mind and the back of my emails, I had people from Jagex, ex-people from Jagex who went to other game studios, reach out to me way before that and saying, hey, would you be interested in joining us to work on another project because of the work you've done at Jagex and other places that, that shows that you can do these kind of things. And then, so I interviewed with Creative Assembly and because they're owned by Sega, with Sega as well. And got a job there, Layoff director, and I started in June 2020. So a few months after everything kind of officially dissolved and the whole kind of contract and stuff like that. And then, my son was born a month after, which was quite exciting, obviously, as well. So, it was a complete different ride. And transitioning back into was a quite nice journey to go with that, because you always kind of build on the skills you learned from the previous one to enhance it in the next one.
Loads of things to unpack there. I was wondering, when you were looking for that new role, it sounded like you started with, okay, what roles are around me physically? Which is interesting because that was before the pandemic. So it's kind of, sometimes you forget, like, I'm obviously going to start with things physically around me. Did you ever have the concern where, if I leave the games industry, it will be harder to come back?
No. I get where you're coming from, because I had a kind of interesting conversations with my mentees about the expectation is if you leave the games industry once, you'll never be invited again. And that's absolutely not true. But some people have that mindset. Even some hiring managers have that mindset still, which is deplorable, but you can't change those people. The expectation is you must enjoy games, and you must enjoy games always, and you must work in this industry, because otherwise if you don't, you're not really committed. That's what I got from my mentees in those kind of comments. I've not seen this myself, so I can only kind of feedback what I heard from my mentees, obviously. But if that's the case, that's a really, really bad mindset, obviously. But now coming back to kind of the question, kind of, is it, if you leave, is it a problem? I don't believe it is. I've hired people at CA, at Sega, and now People Can Fly as well, who are not in the industry, who were in the industry, left, did something else, and now want to go back into it again. There's nothing wrong with that. If anything, it proves that they had different experiences. I'll give an example without giving names. I'm hiring a data analyst right now. That analyst worked for a game studio initially, and then worked for a wider bank. No one's come back in again. So that person knows secure development and secure data. That person knows how to handle huge amounts of data in very kind of confined places and very kind of secure and defined places. He wouldn't have learned that if he was only in games. So that additional experience will help us right now build up pipelines and systems and solutions and warehousing, for example, for data. As an example, but you get the idea, right? That's how I would see it.
Yeah, the transferable skills is the key part. If you leave the games industry and then do something which has very little transferable skills for the role you would want to return to the games industry, I can see the issue there. But you did not do that. The data analyst did not do that. So I think if people are worried, it's not about the industry, it's about the transferable skills. I think that's the key point.
Absolutely. I mean, you worked back, before you did this, obviously you worked in recruitment as well. Did you have a similar kind of outlook on this one? Did you have a similar kind of view from your candidates?
Yeah, so I've done the same thing. I've placed candidates, Unity developers specifically, who, there was one good example where both the Unity developers hasn't worked in a game studio yet, but one of them had worked on the ads for a game, so like a service for game studios, and the other one had loads of personal projects and had done some kind of one-off projects for games, but he hadn't worked in a game studio yet. So this was to join as a senior Unity developer. And they both got the job because they had the drive, they had the transferable skills, and they ended up being like the best contractors they had. And they were very, very effective because they demonstrated all the stuff that they've done from a coding perspective. It was very transferable. Yes, they hadn't had the exact experience of working on a mobile game in that manner, but they had the transferable skills. And we saw that across the industry. Like, we had marketing managers who hadn't worked in the games industry before, but had such good tangential experience and were a crazy gamer. That's, I think, as a big thing to, I say crazy gamer as I think they live and breathe games outside of potentially work. That goes a long way. Like, that passion and drive is a part of a job description which is not there, but it might be one of the most important parts. Like, you can forgive so much if you see the passion and the drive, because then they can pick up the things that they don't already know in 2 weeks. It's less than the onboarding cost. It's like, if it's very trivial, the things that they need to learn, then the passion and drive comes across. It's like, that's exactly
technical skills. Technical in the context of kind of, it's a skill you're learning. Those can always be taught. That drive, that passion cannot ever be taught. So if you have this as a candidate, the teaching part is usually the easy thing.
Exactly. So if you get that hard part done and you have the transferable skills, because obviously it's a competition. If you're applying for a job, if someone has the passion, drive, and the transferable skills, they're going to hire that person. If they have the skills that are working in similar studios, then it is, again, hard to compete. But you can still optimize for all the stuff you can and put your best foot forward, 1,000%. I wanted to ask you about career growth now. You mentioned going sideways. I wanted to ask, is there something, I keep using this frame for the question, but is there something that people get wrong about career growth?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, actually. Really thinking about what I'm going to answer. Career growth is super important, obviously, to yourself, because you prove that the skills you have are increasing and you can deliver more and have more responsibilities. That comes with obviously more money, but on the other side, the responsibility stuff is going to grow. Your responsibilities in what you need to do, in who you're responsible to, and who and what you're responsible for are the things that you'll be measured on. So career growth can go horrifically wrong if you don't understand that. If you're just chasing the check of more money, okay, if you're a senior from a midweight, that's fine. But once you go a bit higher than that, manager, director level, anything above that, the expectation is on you to look after many, many, many more things. People, projects, processes, whatever. And you own these things, and you're responsible to the leadership team, to the investors, maybe, depending on kind of the company you have, and everything like that. So you get it wrong if you expect progression is just about the money, or just a bit more experience, or a bit more reach, or a bit more remit, or whatever. There's much, much more expectation at play in these kind of areas. So when you want to progress sideways, upwards, anything like that, understand clearly what's expected of you, and then demonstrate that. It's obviously a learning curve for you doing that for the first time. It was for me. Honest to God, when I had my first number of people under me managing them, I got it wrong many, many times until I learned how to manage people properly and how to kind of deal with yes sayers, no sayers, anything like that, and listening to feedback and actively listening to opinion. That's a skill you have to learn as well, obviously. But those expectations are on you. You need to be a good manager, and this is how it looks like. You need to be a good leader of people. This is how it looks like. You need to be a owner of these projects or programs or products or systems or whatever it might be in your discipline, obviously. You need to be mindful of that and understand it, and then prove that you can do it. And if you can't do it, and if you're struggling with it, raise your hand, be open, and speak to your manager and your peers and saying, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to kind of deliver this. I got training about management, about product ownership, about business analysis, for example, and finance as well, and P&L and forecasting in other organizations because I didn't know how to do it, but I needed to know it for my promotion. So they gave me that, and they paid for that, obviously, as well, which is great. But you have to expect that, and you have to put that time and work in. And that time and work can sometimes be out of hours, you to research, you to learn, you to do something like that. So come the following Monday, for example, the following week, or the following month, or whatever, you show you're a changed person. You show that you understand these things now better, or you're making a better stab at these kind of deliverables, for example. That's what's important, and that's where you can easily falter if you don't put that effort in.
People are maybe misunderstanding the amount of responsibility that comes with career growth, potentially. I want to touch on the management piece there. You said you got training in like 5 different areas and it was paid for, which is awesome. And when I speak to developers who've been promoted to managers, that isn't often the case. Sometimes they just become managers. You're like, good luck, figure it out, fingers crossed. So if someone wants to progress, they understand and say, Alex, I understand, I'm going to have more responsibility, but let's say their company doesn't offer management training. Like you mentioned, you made a few mistakes. I want to understand what, if I'm becoming a senior developer and I'm going to be leading a team of developers, what's a key thing that I need to make sure I get right?
First of all, be very clear with the problem statement. Here is what we're trying to achieve. This is how we want to tackle it. If you get people on board quite quickly with what it is we're trying to solve and how we can tackle this, is a really, really good thing to get things moving. Then, I mentioned a minute ago, active listening. Understand other people's view on your team. What is it they're concerned about? What is it they think could be done differently or better? As a manager or as a lead, you are sometimes having to make a tough call between option A and option B. And you might make the wrong call. Own that. Own that, saying, guys, people, friends, team, we had this plan. I directed it this way. I messed up. I'm really sorry. We need to pivot. If you show that openness, that vulnerability, but also this clarity and transparency of what's going on, that buys into people, and that really helps people understand what you're trying to achieve, and they feel in delivering that. And that's one important thing. The other important thing is have this regular check-in with your team on an individual basis, but also on a team basis. Not just always about work, but try and find like a lunchtime or something where you all go away and have a lunch together or coffee together or something like that, or for a walk together. Again, depending on whether you're in a studio or remote, insert virtual version of all of these things as you need to. But having a conversation outside of work, away from the topics of work, about what's going on, what's happening, any challenges, any issues, anything that kind of wants to be discussed about kind of planning, training, hiring, anything like that, bring those ones up and do make an effort of taking notes mentally if you can, because you don't want to kind of write while they're talking, for example. So you want to be facing them and being there, present in the room with them, obviously, and try and follow up with them on a very regular cadence of what's happened. You raised this thing with me last week. I just want to give you an update on what's happening. I haven't been able to talk to HR yet, but it's on my list of things to do. I spoke to HR today. We're doing this, or we can't do this because of these reasons. I'm really sorry. That kind of dialogue of you said a question, you had a problem, you had a challenge, you want something. As your lead, as your manager, as a director, I'm listening. I'm actively kind of trying to resolve these issues. This is how far I got so far. Is a really good kind of way to gain trust and gain that kind of, on your side, this understanding of what it means to manage people.
That personal connection, I think, is so key. And I like the point you raised about you don't talk about work, but you can still bring up stuff tangential to work and then follow it up. So it's just like a nice balance. You don't want to hyper optimize every meeting. I've learned that kind of, not the hard way, but like if I went to a networking event and there's a party, I'm like, okay, I need to make sure I become friends with everyone. And then sometimes people feel it, right? So I think that's the case with management, where if everyone thinks like, okay, he's going to be talking about work, I think there's ways to do it. You have the conversation around the topic. You actually care about the person first, then the things come naturally after.
Exactly. And depending on what you are, if it's remote only, for example, the same rules need to apply. So if you have a virtual coffee or a virtual catch up with them outside of working requirements, outside of the project's deliverables, everything, you want to talk just about you and me, for example, make sure your other screens are not showing work stuff. Make sure your chat's on Do Not Disturb. You want to be there virtually with them in this conversation as well. Don't get distracted by always a pop-up from this person asking for an update on that. Try and make Do Not Disturb a thing when you have these kind of conversations. Lower all the windows on your screen down and only have that video of yourself with that person and your notepad up so you can write some notes down if you necessarily need to, or have a pen and be old school. Do these kind of things because you want to treat those people with respect. And respect comes with being actively there in the room with them.
1,000%. Couldn't agree more. I want to touch on the mental health piece here, especially with what's happening recently. And the games industry has loads of, not obstacles, it will throw a lot of stuff at you. And I think as a person, it is hard to handle sometimes. So I wonder, how did you kind of handle your mental health, and how have you taken care of it?
I wish I could handle my mental health better. I must honestly admit this on this conversation. For me, when I used to work in the office, being able to drive home, in those 20, 30 minutes of driving home, you tend to kind of switch off because you listen to a podcast or radio or music or whatever, and that helps switch off things. When you're remote, you're on this computer, and then you're on this computer when you're doing your gaming, and you're on this computer when you're doing personal emails, for example. There is no real switching off, is there? Oh, there's something I could check for tomorrow morning before the meeting starts, for example. So those kind of things are really, really dangerous for you to do. Make a conscious effort of walking away and stepping away from your desk, going for a walk. I've got the benefit of having a family, so playing with my son in the evening, so work's off limits effectively. And I need to kind of force myself to have my phone in a different room to where my son is, so I don't even get distracted by this, to really kind of focus on him and my family and my personal mental health, obviously, as well. But there's more needs to be done, and I need to do myself as well, is this understanding of kind of where are my limitations, what am I currently struggling with, what are my problems? Is it health? Is it finance? Is it this project? Is it a certain person at work? Is it my manager? Is it my underling? Whatever it might be. And those things can niggle at you at night when you lie in bed before you go to sleep, right? You want to avoid this, and you can't always avoid them. But a very good tactic I always learned is breathe to 5. Getting the clarity in your room to kind of make sure you understand whether it's actually a problem you need to deal with or not right now. Don't send angry emails ever. Review them the following morning. And when you write an email, don't put anything in the to just by accident or anything like that. Just kind of write it, preferably Notepad or Word or anything if you need to, if you have to. And make it a point of telling your team or your manager, you need a break right now for 5 minutes to just decompress. And that's usually fine. I've not seen anybody ever get any kind of stick. And if you get stick from your manager on this one, reevaluate your relationship with your manager, obviously, right? But be open and honest about it. I've spoken when I just joined People Can Fly, for example. I flew to Montreal for a week, and I was worried about my family because my son was poorly during that time, very poorly. And my manager asked me how you got to go on. I think I'm a bit struggling today. I've got lots of things to do, which is great, but I'm worried right now about these things. And he sat down with me, had a chat with me, and that kind of stuff really helps. At CA, Creative Assembly, we actually had wellness being weeks and things happening across the studio in many places. Some were virtual, some were on site. It was a really nice thing to do. Not every studio provides that, obviously, and I was lucky to have been part of these things. But for you personally, it's try and figure out what niggles on you right now, what kind of causes you concern, what wakes you up at night, for example. Note these things down. Have a little notepad next to your bed if you need to. And then check them out and talk to manager about these things. Being, again, open and vulnerable and transparent on what's going on is important. It doesn't red flag you in any way, shape, or form, by the way. So if you're thinking, worried, I can't talk to a manager because he might think I'm brittle and frail and everything like that. No, your manager wants you to succeed so the team can succeed, so he can succeed, so the projects can succeed, so the business can succeed. We're all in this together. That's the important message. If he's concerned about you because of what's going on, he will do his best to help you by supporting you, by checking in with you, by having other people work with you on certain things, or taking things off your plate for the time being until you feel more ready for these kind of things. That's learning. That's growth. That's progression for not only yourself, but for your team and for your manager as well. Think of it that way, and that will kind of help you also understand what you can do and how you can improve upon.
For sure. That separation has been so key for me, having the desktop be work, and then at 5, I'm either going to go dancing or boxing. I ain't leaving. I ain't doing anything. And if I want to do an extra shift later, again, I'm going to be working here, and that I can have that separate spot. It is so important. I want to touch on the management piece a little there, because I've had not a exact situation, but I've had people have the fear of kind of speaking up and saying, look, I'm having this issue, because they don't want to be seen as a victim or seen as someone who brings in problem. So I do feel it's important in the way we deliver their message, potentially, of how we're not doing okay. Because I feel like if you say that with more of like, this is the reason I'm not been performing, rather than I'm struggling with this is what I'm trying to do, but it would be great to have some help. I think that frame is really important. I'm wondering what you thought about that.
I need to turn it around a little bit. It depends on what your manager is like. I think that's the best way of putting it, and how the company is like as well, obviously, in this kind of context. You're right. Informing the manager you're not performing well because of these things is a good way of putting it. Telling manager right from the bat-go, I'm struggling right now because of these things, requires some consideration, obviously, as well. Because think of it from your manager side as well. That person will just have been told that you are struggling, that something is going on. They might not have an answer right away for you. They may have to go back to HR and say, hey, what can we do? What are there kind of similar signs across the organization in these teams, for example? Is there a current pattern, for example, happening right now? Or is it individual? And if it's only an individual, what can we do? If it's a team, what can we do for them? Is those things happening not immediately, but very, very quickly after this first kind of conversation about any kind of challenge like that, especially mental health, especially stress, especially kind of being overwhelmed with many, many things. So if your manager tells you, I'll come back to you later, he's not putting you off. He or she is not putting you off. They're trying to kind of figure out what they can do within the organization, within the team, within HR to support these kind of things, obviously, as well. They're not going away and saying, oh, this person. They would never do that. I've never seen this happen in any organization I worked for, and I've never heard stories about this either. So, at least from my perspective, obviously. I know of managers who I used to work with on my peer level who had situations happening in their team. I was lucky it hasn't happened to me yet, where they mentioned that something happened in their team and there was somebody who was struggling, for example, and how to deal with that. And that was dealt with always professionally, and it will always be handled confidentially as well. And they had an HR rep, for example, supporting us as well to make sure we did the best we could to support them as well. Because many organizations have a framework or a handbook about these kind of things, how to manage staff and what happens in these certain situations. And that's a really good thing. I mentioned earlier having these kind of one-to-ones away from work stuff. Those are important. Those are the best places to do this. And don't wait for the next one. If it's booked, let's say in a month's time or whatever. If you need to have a conversation with your manager today or tomorrow because you're really not sure what's happening or what's going on or how to feel, how to improve, for example, or how to get out of this, whatever's happening with you right now, don't be afraid to just message them and say you want to book a meeting to catch up on something that you were worried about. They will make time for you. They will be there for you. And they will listen. Again, if they don't, you probably have a bad manager or a bad company. So leaving is not really an option as well. But being serious about this now, people will listen and people will support you, and they will not think badly of you. If anything, they will do this to support you, to make sure you deliver for the company, for the team, for the project, and for everybody around you. And they'll give you the support they can as much as they can.
An ideal situation. That is an ideal situation.
Obviously, people can happen differently, yeah.
Yeah, of course. I just want to reiterate when you are raising that issue, this is just my opinion, like you want to have it not as a victim frame, but more of a I want to improve frame. Can you help me? Because if you do that once, twice, three times, then potentially that's now your new persona, the person who comes with issues. Even if the issues are the same as the person who comes with those issues, but is from a growth mindset, I feel like that frame is really important. That's just my 2 cents there. I would love to chat about LinkedIn. You have an interesting relationship with LinkedIn.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, your LinkedIn gave you your last job, if I'm correct.
That's right.
They reached out to you, and you are a very active user. Over 20,000 now followers, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think 22 by now. Not really counting.
22, yeah, growing and counting. So, yeah, what's your relationship with LinkedIn?
It used to be really good. I use a platform for two things predominantly. So I started LinkedIn, God, a long time ago, really long time ago, and it was used back then for me actually to talk to vendors, if anything. We're talking this long ago, before DrugX. So
BD, business development.
Oh yeah, and it was a means for me to find vendors or middleware providers or software providers or dev providers or code dev providers long before it was a thing, as it is right now, by the way. So that was kind of what I used it for, and I grew a team or grew people, grew connections through that because I needed people to do certain jobs within the organization I was working on to deliver the stuff I did. And then I think during DrugX, I used it more to kind of connect with people in the games industry because then it kind of felt a bit more kind of a big good thing to do. And then I didn't use it for a very long time because I had nothing to say. I had nothing to look for. I had nothing to really kind of engage with, if that makes sense. I had my Twitter, I had other things, but I never really kind of used them as a kind of a daily kind of driver for this. And then what happened was that when I moved to Creative Assembly, I then started using LinkedIn more actively. And the reason for this one was because I was working at Creative Assembly supporting their legacy project, which was supporting colleges, universities, and places around the UK to drive awareness of the games industry, to help people get into jobs, to talk about what the games industry is, to provide mentorship to people, and finally a project stuff, for example, to kind of open up what's behind the curtain of the games industry, basically, and provide many, many other things, by the way. Legacy project was amazing, is amazing. Anyway, so I used that, and I got more active on LinkedIn because then whenever I spoke at university or spoke in a talk, for example, I got connections from students, from parents, from teachers, and also from other designers and developers who were also on those talks to kind of really grow the network in this kind of way. And I started sharing more information about the games industry, what other games do, how they perform, data about the games industry, for example. So it was really kind of nice growth for me. And then 2022 happened, and the first kind of bigger wave of layoffs happened. And I got involved because one of the studios we used to work with at CA and also at DrugX had layoffs happen. And I felt personally affected because I knew those people. All of a sudden, the layoffs became real to me in the scale they were. That's kind of how I got into it, supporting people and then making connections myself with recruiters, with other studios, with other studio managers, with other leaders within the organizations. Not for jobs for myself, but rather to kind of build that network of, hey, I know people that are really, really good. What have you got? Can you help me? Can we help them? That was the kind of growth I had with this. And because I shared these support messages, the links to jobs, the links to kind of helping and resources from Amir and other places, and even my own, that's how I grew my connections, because there are people looking for jobs, wanting to help, looking for help, but also wanting to help. How can I help you to kind of drive my kind of company to kind of show more jobs, for example? Things like that. So it was a necessity to support people more than anything. And then because these layoffs just didn't stop, I didn't stop. In fact, I doubled down. I posted much, much more about these kind of things, about the layoffs, about the support, about everything else around us, obviously. And yeah, that's kind of how I grew. And it was within months. I was from a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand, and then to 10,000, and then now 20,000. Because I think the content I provide in terms of what the games industry does and what kind of other teams are doing seems useful, but also because I still wanted to drive that support of, hey, you've been affected. How can we help you? I'll make these engagements. I'll make these connections. I do these things to improve, hopefully, your future. And through that, my personal satisfaction of being able to have helped people. I'm not in it for money. I'm not getting paid a dime. I wish I did. I'm not doing it for fame. Fuck no. I'm doing this purely for how can I help and how can I make more awareness of what's going on.
And you've done that because you've connected people. I've heard you talk about it before. You have the 70 mentees. Like LinkedIn is a networking platform, and you used it exactly like that. And then you even, with your content, it was all about networking, connecting people to jobs. So I want to potentially challenge you a little bit here. So, because you mentioned at the start, like your relationship changed with LinkedIn recently, and it's been a bit worse. And I read one of your recent posts where you kind of talked about it in a bit more detail. So just with the recent change of the algorithm, changing the reach is going lower, I feel, for like bigger accounts, and it's across the website, not necessarily just the gaming industry. The impact that you're getting, connecting people to jobs, is that not the main reason we're doing LinkedIn? And is that not still happening?
I think it does, but on a much, much smaller scale, on a more one-to-one kind of scale as opposed to one-to-all kind of scale. I'll give you an example. So my posts are all about kind of trying to find as many posts of so many kind of sources of jobs for a particular discipline. Let's say engineering, art, audio, QA, IT, whatever. I do these to help people speed up their search and find them other resources and sources of information or job boards or advice or reviews for portfolios or resumes or anything like that that they might not have thought of. Imagine this, you've been laid off yesterday. Today you're in shock. Today you're scrambling to kind of write a CV, to update your profile. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to search. Your head is in a complete spin. Are you going to make the rent tonight? This month, not tonight. These kind of things are all in your head. I'm trying to make a single simplification by saying, here is, if you're an engineer, here's a couple of links for you, a couple of resources for you. You can take them one by one, top down, whatever you want. They should give you some kind of insight what's happening right now and where you can find jobs and what's available for you right now. And here's some career advice, some CV advice, some kind of common questions asked around the industry, for example, for interviews and stuff like that. That's what I'm trying to do, right? So taking or reducing that reach for people who are stressed, who don't know me yet, who don't know these resources exist, who see that Harry, for example, reposted this or liked this. Therefore, I'm a friend of Harry. I can see this and something I can now engage with this. If that's not there, if that's gone, if that reach has now been reduced, and you may never see that, you're now spinning still. You don't know what's going on. You don't have that leg up that somebody else has gotten because they've seen this post, right? That doesn't mean it's stopping. You can still follow other recruiters. You can still follow these kind of things, and it's on a one-to-one basis. And that's manual. It exists and it's doing the right job. Don't get me wrong. I'm not discounting any of this. The job I was trying to do to provide help at scale, and that feels is gone. Not feels. I know it's gone. I can see my analytics. I can see my data, and I can see people reaching out on LinkedIn and Discord now as well, on messages on my inbox saying, hey, I need help. Can you help me again? I can't find your post. I can't see this. I had to put a notification bar on your thing, and even then I can't see it in my feed sometimes. That's broken. That's not an algorithm. That's absolutely broken, right? Again, it's not about fame. It's not about anything else than helping people. And I feel that this algorithm thing has changed it. If I'm being very blunt now, if LinkedIn wants to become TikTok, I'm not having TikTok. I'm not having LinkedIn, because then my reach is gone and then the support is gone. That's what it is all about. People need help. People need support. LinkedIn was meant to be and is meant to be a professional network to support each other. If it's not doing that anymore, it's not my network anymore.
I'm just trying to think of it from LinkedIn's perspective now. So when people say LinkedIn's becoming TikTok, I think potentially they're looking at using like the factors like, oh, is this post a quality post, quote unquote? So how much people time spending on it, the engagement, all of that. And then they're trying to share that to more people. And I'm just wondering here, like the posts that have the collection of the lists. I'm just trying to think if there's a solution we could do here where, because these are kind of resources. It's been really interesting. I'm just thinking out loud, to be honest, at this point. So like Amir with his recent Discord, that's an interesting solution because there is now a hub where people can still talk. The post can bring people to that community potentially. And the way LinkedIn works, like you could have a master resource on your profile potentially. So I'm wondering if there's a way to adapt here and we can keep the solution. So the post itself, potentially doesn't need to be the master resource, but we could post stuff that will direct them to a master resource. And I'm not saying to never do a post which has very detailed all the links, but if that's not working anymore, I feel like we can still get the same message. Sorry, we can still get a similar result, if that makes sense.
I think it needs adaptation. And behind the curtain from my perspective at the moment. So I do LinkedIn stuff like these posts about jobs, about availability and these kind of things on weekends because it's not touching my work time. I'm trying to avoid it as much as I can and to pre-plan these kind of things in. I can absolutely change my format and my content and my thing to make it work for the algorithm. The question is, should I? Is the first question, obviously. And the second thing is, I don't yet know what works. For me, providing good information right away feels to me like it's the right thing to do because you want people to avoid multiple clicks. I think there's also an issue with Discord where you have to go to a different platform, for example, or a different link or anything like that to create a profile there, to be invited and everything. There are many steps in the way, and in many cases there's good things because it provides us a level of security and safety in an organization in that group as well, obviously in Discord. But as a person, again, coming back to the person that's been laid off, are you willing to do all that for help? You might, or you might be overwhelming for you. So how can we kind of avoid these kind of steps? Taking your point though about the kind of changing the post kind of content and making them a bit more different to kind of fulfill that kind of level of quality posting that LinkedIn wants to do in the new algorithm, for example. I think there's opportunity in it as well, obviously. I haven't tried it. Being blunt, I haven't got the time right now to do that, and I would love to find that time to do it. And maybe it works for me, maybe it's for others as well. It's just, I get the feeling that there was a decision made to support personal branding. I don't know how to best put this. I'm struggling for the right wording for this. Over supporting your connections. I think that's kind of where we're going to figure things out. If you already have connections that follow you regularly, they might already kind of be in your feed every day anyway and comment to your stuff every day anyway, because that's what they do and it's how they interact with LinkedIn. All of a sudden, you've engaged them in a way that TikTok does by having them always on the platform, always scrolling, always doing these things, always commenting, liking, whatever, and ever and ever. That's their life. People who look for jobs, it can't be their life scrolling through things, looking at things all the time, looking at different information. They need things like now and need help right now because otherwise that's time wasted almost, right? So how can we kind of improve that? I feel taking your point of saying having resources on a certain profile is a good thing. I'm doing it myself, so is Amir. How do you direct people to that if they even can't find you?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. So the LinkedIn making the decision to favor personal branding rather than helping people. There's a big part here, which I'm just thinking for your personal, mental well-being of processing this. The issue we have is we are lacking a way of measuring the impact. We only have the impressions, the likes, and people that message you like, Alex, I got a job. Great. So because we have more anecdotal evidence, it feels like, okay, is the impact not there? And to your point of the personal branding being pushed more, like a lot of those big creators, I spoke to a couple of them, they've had similar massive decreases in reach, but they're talking about personal branding. They might have the perfect quality post, but because they're big creators, the reach has gone down. But when I speak to them about kind of the conversations in the DMs or people actually engaging, that's increased. So I'm wondering if the right audience is being shown now But the thing is, we don't know, which is the horrible part. Is like, well, I'm guessing here, but like the conversations have increased, like in the DM. So I'm just thinking, is there, because we don't know, we're just looking at the impression number, and we see that taking a nosedive, but potentially the impact is still there, but we don't know. So I don't want you to quit because of that, because potentially the same amount of people could be getting that help, right? The point about making the content kind of more quality, just in the sense like it's just more time can spend people looking at it. Like I feel like we can break down the core message, boom, 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 boom. Here's kind of the resources, or potentially putting that in the comments. Like there's things we could play around with, but the message is there, and you could still have that type of post that you do, which is the master resource. But potentially that can't be, not can't be, that will be a part of the strategy, if that makes sense. Because I feel like the bad outcome here is you stopping. So if we don't want you to stop, I'm wondering if there's just a way to measure the impact more, kind of more concretely, rather than just looking at the impression number.
Yeah, understand. Just on one point you raised about the DMs increasing, that is largely because they can't find the content anymore. So I've seen in mine, for example, the request and I'm saying, hey, where I can find, I don't know where to find this, where to link this to. And I say, well, here's the link. Or I couldn't even see it in my feed. Those DMs are increasing. So that means there's definitely something wrong in that kind of visibility of thing, right? That's what I kind of just point response. So the one-to-one engagements are increasing, and I'm increasing mine personally to send stuff back to people who have struggled previously, saying, hey, just so you know, I've forgotten you. In case you can't find it, here's the latest I've got. I've done over 100 of those messages yesterday evening. I shouldn't need to do that, right? To go to one-to-one person who looking for jobs right now, who can't find my post, to say, here's my latest link. In case you can't see it, here's my latest link. And getting a message back, oh, thank you, I couldn't see it. Thank you, it hasn't come up yet. I shouldn't need to do that in the nicest possible way. Because that therefore means that there's definitely something that says to me that those people who are looking for something need that visibility. And again, it could be that I need to change my formatting and my content to make that happen. But right now, in having, we're now in month 4 of the year, and we've always seen more layoffs than we had last year, thereabouts. That's a really bad time, and that's never a good time, by the way. But it's we got to figure out how to kind of make this happen. I cannot spend my evening doing this. I've got family. I cannot spend my day because I got work. So when does it happen? Over the weekend. So I would have to wait X number of days, and there's a person waiting and saying, hey, I can't find it. Where is it? This needs to happen differently, and this needs to kind of be considered. We got to figure out a better way of doing this. We got to figure out a better way to promote that content that's important to people. I feel right now that transition period from what was before to what is now is stark, and I don't think there's an easy way to transition in tech anyway. So I get that completely. I don't, I'm a developer myself, so I know what they're going through as well. The frustration is kind of how do we do this in a way that is almost instantaneous, so people who are looking or need stuff don't feel left out. I think that's what we're trying to figure out now, right? And I think some people, like yourself, certainly, like Ali Farah as well, they cracked it quite quickly because your content was already kind of in a very similar kind of state, if I may be open, that the algorithm understands and kind of promotes and pushes forward because of the way you write, because of the way you put content together. That content promotes something else, be that what's happening right now, the engagement you're currently having, the people you're speaking to right now, the event you're going to, for example. That's a complete different kind of push for audience. Mm-hmm. And that made it, and that's why it's working for you. I need to figure out a way to kind of make my content work in a similar kind of way in that new algorithm, but still push the message I'm trying to push, which is there's help for you there.
I'm thinking of a Matt Herndon's example as well, because he posts, the post itself has a small tip. I'm not saying to become Matt Herndon, but I'm just using him as an example. And then he can go to a master newsletter where you get it kind of on tap. So I'm potentially feeling it's not about the fact that this post supports people, this post doesn't support people, let's limit this post. I don't think that's what's happening. I think we agree there. 100% reiterating the point. The fact that it's happened very quickly during the time that there's layoffs and there's no communication, that's very frustrating, of course. My hope is that we don't stop the posting and we just adapt and we see what can happen. I don't think it's a conscious decision of like, hey, this post is about jobs and we're going to promote this topic. I personally, again, this is all assumptions, I'm just guessing. I just feel like there is a solution here. I think that's my main kind of 2 cents on that. There is a solution here for sure. And 100% agree with you. You shouldn't be spending time sending 100 DMs to someone who is obviously engaged and wants to find that content, actually was looking for it and couldn't find it in their feed. 100%. For me, the solution, we can obviously try talk to LinkedIn and get some answers, and hopefully that will happen. But if we assume that won't happen, because let's say it doesn't, then in my opinion, the solution isn't we don't stop. We find a way to communicate it, potentially have, just have that live on your profile, and then potentially the content could just take them there. Because once they have that information, they have that information. There's a finite amount of people who need that information. So if the content is hopefully bringing them to that master resource, could be in comments or what have you. But I appreciate where you're coming from, because you're doing this all on a weekend. And again, you're not monetizing any of this. So I can feel, I feel where you're coming from. I would love to ask you a final question. Just where do you see us going the next 8 months? Has been your perspective? Where do you think the games industry is going?
I think we'll see a bit more innovation this year. Innovation in terms of other genres being picked out, other kind of types of games that are being made that really show there's a difference in your standard kind of live game, for example, and your standard kind of shooter, your standard kind of MOBA, for example, and things like that. I think we'll definitely see Unreal 5 being used much, much more efficiently and effectively than it has last year. Because people are going to use the technology and seeing how things go with that and creating some truly incredible stuff. I would love to know what happens, whether it's going to be a PS5 Pro or not, or whether it's going to be a Switch 2 anytime this year. It would be fantastic, obviously. And I'd love to kind of see what people do with the current generation of consoles and how they eke out that last bit of performance, that last bit of extra awesomeness to kind of make these cool games. I worry there'll be more layoffs. I think we're not seeing the end of it yet. But I can also see, because I'm looking at resources and trying to kind of find more jobs for people, companies are still hiring. And that's an important message, I think. People are still hiring. They want to make great games and they want to be successful and they're looking for the right stuff. That's happening, which is fantastic, obviously, as well. I think we'll see, certainly at Gamescom and probably at TGAs as well again, a lot more talk about it, and also more opportunity of smaller studios, definitely indies and AA coming on board as well to show what they're doing and wanting to grow with that as well. I think those are kind of key things I can see behind this one as well. And I think people will make much, much more use of things like GDC talks or talks on YouTube or similar kind of places to learn more about the craft, improve their skills, learn new tricks, and really kind of jump over that current kind of way of quality and provide this kind of extra level of quality of what's currently out there. And that'll be exciting, I think, for us as gamers, but also for the competition aspect. Look what they're doing with this tech. How can we do a similar or better thing as well, obviously? I think that'll definitely be the case. Speaking with the IGDA, because I'm a member there obviously as well, and BAFTA, there'll be much, much more outreach coming of support articles, support messages, support networks, for example, to train, to mentor, to provide advice to the industry as well in terms of support across the companies, but also kind of how companies kind of help other people, for example. So that'll be exciting. Yeah, I think those are kind of key topics I can think of right now. I think it's not going to be all rosy, but it's definitely going to go towards a positive kind of trend. And the stuff we're going to see from studios this year will again really kind of break people's kind of mind saying, whoa, this is amazing. So yeah, I can't wait for that.
Nice. No, I'm looking forward to it. And Yeah, I share the positive sentiment. We're not going to have a pain-free year, but I think we're going to be in the right direction near the end of it for sure. And I love the collaboration part. Like I see it quite a bit, the buzz that people have after the big events like GDC and Gamescom. I feel like it makes a big difference in like hiring specifically. One quick thing there, like you've collecting the jobs resources. Have you noticed any uptick in jobs? I've seen a few more jobs on my feed, but that's just an anecdotal thing for me.
I have in certain areas. So production and engineering has certainly grown.
Yeah,
a lot.
That's the one I've seen.
Art has also grown. I saw from the previous kind of post I did, I think it's a 7 to 10% uptick in number of jobs coming across the world,
Oh, wow.
which is great. Others haven't. So QA has been very much the same. IT has been very much the same. Biz dev has been much the same. So you can see we're looking to hire kind of people right now at the moment, which is kind of interesting. But no, I think net overall, the number of jobs have certainly increased. And if you look at my previous update to this update across the board, so I've just been doing, let me just give me a second. So I've released an update to art and animation, engineering, QA, production, and marketing. All of these ones had an increase. The QA one just about by 1%, so not very much, but it's still okay, right? The rest has all increased. We're talking here tens of jobs, not hundreds of thousands of jobs, obviously, but still it's an increase in this one, certainly kind of where we are in the UK and also worldwide. Art and animation engineering are the highest ones. So we're talking here hundreds of jobs have been increased. So that's a positive thing as well, obviously. I've not had yet one, although I'm still writing the other ones, where we've seen a decrease. So that's a positive thing, I would say.
Yeah, 100%, very positive. And from my time in recruitment, this time is a key hiring point, but then we get a big uptick right after summer. Everyone's like, "Oh wait, we really do need to hire that person now. Like we need to, like we need to stop dilly dallying." And then there's two surges. Like one after like March time, I feel like, so they want someone to start before summer. Then one was like, "All right, we need people now." And then so fingers crossed, Gamescom, we'll just see that trend keep going.
Certainly.
That'll be cool. Amazing. Fantastic. Alexander, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
Back and forth. It's been great. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Harry. Really appreciate that.